Okay, what I've got going on today is a continuation of a project I started last month. I'm updating my relief valves on tank number 1 and tank number 2. Last month I did these here. There are 8 of them here on tank number 2. The valve clusters and the relief valves are made by Marshall Excelsior. And if you can see up there, you'll get a better picture later on, a more accurate picture. There are handles up there to where you can turn, and those clusters are designed so that you can replace those relief valves one at a time while still on top of the tank and with the tank still full of pressure. That's the idea anyway. What I ran into is that at the factory, Marshall drove those relief valves in so deeply and so tightly that we could not remove them at all up there. In fact, when I eventually gave up trying, I had my big ratchet, 7 feet of cheater pipe, and I was trying to, because there's a socket, Marshall has a socket, I'll show you that socket too a little bit later, and I just snapped my great big ratchet. I just snapped it off, and that's on top, so I quit. You know, it's too dangerous. It's not worth getting seriously hurt up there because of Marshall Excelsior is too irresponsible in how they tighten those valves in that valve cluster. So we ended up having to take them down from the tank. Had to empty the tank, take it down, and remove everything. Had to secure them down the ground, and I'll show you what we did there. But to empty this tank, I used my compressors, my compressors to empty this. So we just had to pick a day, and this thing was at about 55% full when we started. And so I used my compressors to push the liquid out of here and push it over to my other 3 tanks. I'll show you quickly how we got that all set up. And if you'll notice, there's relief valve stacks over here, but none on the new ones. State of Indiana has changed where they no longer require relief stacks. So as I update these, I'm not putting the stacks back. I just don't need them. It's not worth the extra weight and the extra work to put them in. The reliefs on these 2 tanks are 10 years old. Marshall says that every 10 years they want their relief valves replaced unless they're in a more corrosive environment, and then they want them replaced sooner. But here where I'm at in Indiana, once every 10 years is the service life. Rego is every 10 years. Fisher is every 12 years. And those are the only 3 that I know about. So anyway, I've got the liquid out of here, and we've been recovering the pressure because we've got to get this pressure down. Eventually we got to get the pressure down here to less than half of a pound of pressure before we start taking the stacks off. As you can, now it's a little tough to see there, but that pressure gauge says we're right about 20 pounds. And a little bit later this morning, I'm going to replace that pressure gauge with a digital pressure gauge so I can get a more accurate reading. I'll show you about that too. Okay, back here at my compressors, I can do this because I've got more than 1 compressor, and it makes transferring product much easier. If I only had 1 compressor, then I would have to have piped in a bypass vapor line somewhere in the system, but The way I've got it, the way we're using this is one compressor is just going to be a pass-through. And that's all I'm doing. It's going to just run through, and we're going to get this compressor set up as if we were offloading a car. And then one of these compressors is going to be set up for recovery as if we were recovering a rail car. But instead of being connected to there, we're just making a loop through the system. And instead of pulling vapor from a rail car, we're pulling vapor from the tanks we want to fill. And then our recovery line, like I wanted to get the liquid out of one, I'm going to recover into tank one. I'll have its vapor valve shut off so that as I recover into it, its pressure is going to go up a little bit. And then I want to transfer the liquid over to tanks 2, 3, and 4. So I pull the vapor from the top of 2, 3, and 4. And then as their pressure goes down and the pressure goes up in tank 1, the liquid will just naturally flow over into tanks 2, 3, and 4. And to make sure that that happens smoothly, I shut off my recovery line going into the bottom of tank 2, tanks 3, and 4. So I'll shut them off so that I'm just pulling vapor from tanks 2, 3, and 4, and I'm just recovering and shoving pressure into tank 2. That'll give me my pressure difference. The liquid will transfer over. The way we know it here is you listen for a change in pitch. The liquid will have a certain sound as it's going through the pipes, and you can also, just put your hand on the metal. As liquid's running through the trunk line is going to feel cool, and the piping coming out of the tanks is going to be cool. And then once all the liquid's out, you'll hear a change in pitch, because liquid running through pipe does not sound the same as vapor running through pipe. So we'll hear that change in pitch, and that's when we're going to assume that we've gotten out all the liquid that we can. And then when that's done, we come out here, shut the compressors down, and then we start the reversing valves so that we can isolate tanks 2, 3, and 4, and then we start pulling vapor only from the top of tank 2. And then we'll just recover this down. And tank 2 is a 60,000 gallon tank, which is equivalent to about 2 rail cars. It's going to take at least 6 hours of recovery time to get the vapor pressure down low enough in this tank to where I can safely take the relief valve stacks off and work on it. Also, one of the lessons we learned over the time was do your recovery in 2 stages. You do your first recovery of about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, and what that'll do is you're always going to have some residual liquid laying in that tank somewhere, or in some of the connective piping somewhere. Well, just like we leave a heel in the rail car of about 170 gallons when we're done, and it takes like 20-30 minutes of recovery to boil off that heel, we want the first half hour or so, or maybe an hour of recovery on this storage tank to just boil out any residual liquid that's laying inside that tank. So we'll recover it down for, like I said, 3 or 4 hours, and then come back the next day and then do the final recovery until we pull it down to about a ½ pound of pressure or less. And so that's where we're at this morning, is I'm going to start up my compressors. And when I get down to 30 psi in the tank, I'll set it up to where I'm going to use 2 compressors for recovery. And it'll speed up my time a little bit, and I can do it when I get, like I said, once I get less than 30 pounds in this tank, even running 2 compressors, I won't pull vapor fast enough to slam the internal valve on this tank. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to be clipping stopping and starting this several times, and that way I can go over. I wasn't planning on shooting this video about the relief valves because it's kind of, you know, standard stuff, but when I ran into all the trouble with these Marshalls, I thought it would be beneficial to share what I ran into, maybe help you to not have to go through the same problems that I did. And I am going, when it's all said and done, I intend to contact Marshall and voice my concerns about how they over tightened their relief valve. So anyway, that's it for now. Okay, Chair, we're ready to start up again. Okay, I'm a little bit farther along than I was when I did the first segment. So the tank is isolated. Yeah, tank 1 is isolated, so got lockout tag outs on those, got them going. I've got a digital pressure gauge in there. I removed the normal pressure gauge and went to the digital, and then we're going to use a ladder to access everything to get up. And one of the things we do here to secure a ladder is I put a magnet. It's about a 1,600-pound magnet. I put that on there, and then just use a ratchet strap to secure the ladder in place so it doesn't move on me. And then we have walk-through extensions on the top. I bought those at Menards, I think, a few years ago. So I'm going to show you here this pressure gauge and why I like it. Can we get that? I hope we can get that. It's reading 3.2 psi. I need to get that down to 0.5 or less. Little side note, this tank here was an anhydrous ammonia tank, is what it was built for. And we got it for pretty cheap. Had it trucked up here. Well, it had no provision in the tank for a fixed liquid level gauge or fixed liquid level dip tube in here, and it also had no provision for a pressure gauge. So I ran this swage lock tubing here up at the top of the tank and tied in. I'll show you where I tied in, but I just used this Marshall valve here, and then I got a spit on the side, and I got this tag says it's 85% of capacity is what this. So if you open this up and it starts to spit a steady stream of fog, you know your tank's at 85%. Based on volume, or based on the diameter of the tank, I should say. But you can see right there where I tied it on the top of that flange, and then I ran another swage lock tube down in the center of that valve, and it comes down deep enough to where it's at the 85% of the tank's diameter. So what we're going to do here this morning is we're going to take all 4 of these stacks off. There's weather caps on the top. They've been up here for 10 years, coated in paint. I'm taking them off with a hammer. There's no way I'm going to try to unthread them. And then you can see on the side of the relief valve that we've got weep hole pipe aways. And so eventually I'm going to take all them off, but we'll unthread this pipe, drop it down to the ground, and then when I get low enough, then we'll start breaking all the bolts loose and getting that ready. And then when we get this down on the ground, I'll show you how I'll show you how the internals work on this little valve body. But the problem we're running into with Marshalls, they're threading these in too deep. It's a little tough to see, I think, but I'm averaging on this, and on the 8 on the other tank, we were only showing 1.5 threads. There are 11 full threads on this valve, and you can only see 1.5 threads. A properly engaged 2.5-inch pipe fitting should be threaded in about 1 inch. And these threads are 1.25 inches long, so you should be seeing about 3 full threads here. Now there's one here. That's not so bad. That's probably one of the best ones I've seen. But we learned the hard way not to trust these valves to be safe to remove on top of a tank. So we're going to drop this whole body down to the ground, and I'll show you the bolt pattern that I set into some concrete to give us a secure base to take these apart at. So like I said, we're going to pull these stacks down, lower them down one at a time. Our partner company builds bulk plants, and they set a lot of tanks in different states, and so I'm going to just give them these. These are just pipe away stacks. They're schedule 40. They don't have to be schedule 80. They're just schedule 40, and they're about 3 feet long. So I'll end up giving them to that company so they can use them on any of their other future projects. So I think that'll do it for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to be filming anything up here once we get started, simply because even at a 1/2 pound of pressure, there's going to be a large volume of product coming out. I pulled different valves out of tanks, you know, with 5 pounds of pressure. You can do it. It's not the most pleasant experience you ever had, but you can take parts off. It's more difficult to put parts back on when you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds of pressure in a tank. It becomes very difficult, but we'll get it down, and then when it's done, as each stack comes off, we'll put a blind flange on here and use 2 bolts to secure the blind flange in place. And so when we're done, we'll take both stacks down, have 2 blind flanges, and then we'll go and work on these. So that's it for now. All right, anyway, back up here. Just going to shoot real quick, just show you about how I'm going to take these weather caps off, and then take one of these off, and then how we're going to get down using a rope. We're going to bring the valve clusters down using this rope as well. I'll show you how to do that. That way, if you ever run into a situation where you don't have power equipment available to get yourselves up here and down, this is a way to do it. Got a new guy working for me. Hey, Scott. He's going to run the camera here for just a second. So here, just better watch that. Anyway, you see this? Yeah. Yeah, just nice simple cinch. And then that's it. We're just going to repeat the same thing on the other 7. And then we're down to 1 pound of pressure. So we'll work on this and keep running the compressors. That's it for now. Okay, I have all the bolts out of this cluster, and I've got all but 1 out of that other. We brought our pressure gauge down to where it read 0.0 psi. Now granted, we're running it through this tube here, so it's got to run a long way, so there's probably a little bit more pressure than what the gauge said, but nonetheless it's extremely low. And then keep in mind that this whole part of the tank here is in sunshine. So as the sun starts warming this part of the tank, it's always going to keep building some pressure of some sort. So I'm going to have Scott stand on the ladder and hold this, and I'm going to move this cluster a little bit so you can hear that even at such low pressure, there's still quite a volume of vapor coming out. And then I'm going to take this cluster off and put a blind flange on to cap it. So here we go. What I want to show you is how we're going to lower this down. There's a chain right here, right in here, and that's what we're going to tie to. But to keep from destroying the paint here, we bought a bunch of bath mats a few years ago. We're just going to take a bath mat, tie it around here, and just let it slide. Let this slide right down the tank. All right, just going to set it down. Scott's going to get down there and he's going to control this other end of the rope, and we're going to run it across these 2 risers here, and then that'll give enough friction that as he lowers it down, he can stand off to a side, and as it lowers the rope down in there, it'll go down nice and smooth. It's worked really well for us in the past, having to do it this way, but it's kind of a heavy assembly, so essentially like that. So that's all for up here. I'll shut the camera off so we can get to work. Okay, we got the other valve cluster off here. Went ahead and repositioned the gasket here so it's not hissing anymore, and then we got that one there. It's all set. Doing pretty good. I just want to show you real quickly what we're going to do here. We're just going to slide this down, and let me do that real quick. It's all you, Scott. And down it goes. As you can tell, my tanks could certainly use a paint job. This summer, 2024, is a big maintenance summer for me. I'm going to be spending a lot of money. And I knew I was going to be taking these clusters off, so we're not planning on painting the tanks till 2025. And even doing all this, you know, I knew we would scuff the paint some, but it's not bad. It's a nice, safe way for two guys to be able to take a big valve cluster off of here. You know, so anyway, that's it for now. I'll change the battery in the SD card, and then I'll take you around. We'll start working on these valves. Okay, we got both the clusters down. You know, you can kind of look in here and see about how many threads are showing there. That one's in not quite as deep. That was not terrible bad. This one is bad. That's in too deep. So this, you notice this has got a raised face, and so we want to protect it. So what I ended up having to do is I couldn't figure out a way to safely get this apart. I couldn't. I was just staying awake trying to figure this up, and I just take it as a divine epiphany I got one morning, was that I had this piece of concrete and it's pretty deep in the ground. And so we did a bolt pattern of 3/4 inch concrete anchors. We're using an old gasket just to protect that raised face. And then we take each valve cluster, set it on there, and secure it down with 4 bolts. And that'll hold it in place. And here's the socket that Marshall sells for putting on here. It's a 1-inch drive. And like I said, it snapped my big ratchet. I ended up buying this in Milwaukee. It's the biggest one they sell. On the box, it's rated for 2,000 foot-pounds of torque for unthreading. But if you ever want to watch something interesting, there's a channel on YouTube called Torque Test Channel. You watch, and they do dyno testing of these things, and the real world on this is about 1,400 to 1,500 foot-pounds of torque in the reverse. If you read the manual or the literature on Marshall, they say these valves are to be put in at 146 foot-pounds of torque. Well, we'll try it here just to see if any of them will come loose. But if this sucker here is running, you know, 1,400 foot-pounds and cannot move them, how is any human being supposed to take these apart up on top of a tank? There's just no safe way to do it. So what we'll do is we'll get these bolted down, and then we'll remove these deflectors. And what this deflector is this relief valve's got 3 plugs, one on every other flat. And this is a weep hole in case moisture gets down inside here, it can weep out. But also, if this thing were to pop in a fire, instead of shooting a little flame out, coming out sideways where it could hit another relief or another cluster, it'll angle it up and shoot and direct a flame away so it doesn't directly impinge on another valve. So, and like I said, when we get this apart, I'll show you how this works, give you a good idea about it. So, all right, back in a minute. Okay, we got this one bolted down. Just going to pick one of them randomly, see if we can get it out with the impact. The last group of 8 valves we did, I got one out with the impact. We had used a 3-foot pipe wrench here, and that cheater pipe is 6.5 feet, and it took both of us to get these to move. So we'll find out. Oh, another thing, see these rivets? They get in the way. We may or may not have to bust these rivets off, But for a fact, an absolute fact, you can look down in there, there's not a lot of, you know, nothing really in the way, but these pop rivets will hang you up. So on all the new ones, we're going to take a chisel and we're going to break all of them off on the brand new ones, and then we'll save all the tags and we'll store them away, and we'll identify, you know, what for we're doing with each cluster. Dropping any? Well, I have to get a hammer to take that off. That's not coming off. What is a fellow supposed to do when you're on top of a tank and an impact wrench that'll do 1,400 foot-pounds of loosening torque can't move a fitting? What's a guy supposed to do, Marshall, Excelsior? What's a guy supposed to do besides get hurt? So we're going to use that eventually when we set them, and we'll use it when we get this loose. But we'll get a hammer. We'll run this, but we'll edit it out so not to waste all the time. So let me get a hammer, we'll take that off. And then we'll end up setting a tripod up there. Okay. So, because we're going to use a pipe wrench on everything else, we're not going to chisel these off. But like I said, we will chisel them off on all the new ones. You can get an idea if you just look down inside here. Where it is, there's a breakaway. See, this line here is a breakaway. Then in case of high winds or some damage, this will snap off at this top part and still protect your spring on the inside. And of course, these are all non-adjustable. Once you get them set, we're never allowed to touch anything on it. So now we just got to pick a valve. Give you an idea, look at all that excess pipe dope that's laying down in there. Look how thick that is down in there. They over-doped this. It's way overdone. This here is like an adjustable seat, so that as this thing turns, this is what the hard seat, you want to hold that, Scott?
Yep.
See that? I flipped it up, and this is a hard seat on a hard seat here. So it'll do a really good job on sealing, but it will not be a 100%. But what you would do normally is we want to replace this. You can see that they're numbered. Here's the number 1. And then here it says port closed. And you see that port closed? Now you probably get close. And then number 1 here on the handle, that's a port that we're closing off. Then normally what a fellow would do is you'd open up this bleeder and you would vent all the vapor inside this cavity. And then you could take this valve off, put a new one in, and you still would have these other 3 in communication with the vapor space on the tank. And then you would still have coverage on the tank, and you could still do it while there's a lot of pressure in the tank. Well, as you just saw here, there's no way a human being can safely pull these reliefs on top of a tank, because we were using a 3-foot pipe wrench, and that cheater pipe is 6.5 feet long, and it took both of us just to get the first one to pop, and we had to work on it. The others were not quite as bad, but they still couldn't do it with that impact. Again, the literature from Marshall says 146 pounds of tightening torque. That thing's doing about 1,400, and it couldn't do it. Marshall is putting people's lives at risk because they are over torquing these in. That's my personal opinion, and I think my opinion matters because I'm the idiot that's up there trying to do this on top of a tank. So, not done ranting, but for the moment maybe. Then I'll show you here, we'll just flip these again and you can get an idea. So now we're in a neutral position here, and now all 4 ports are open. Now we close that one, neutral, that one, neutral, that one, neutral. So what I do is once a year you're required to inspect your relief valve. So one of the things I do is I run this through an entire circuit all the way around, make sure this handle turns good. Then you just want to make sure your bleeders aren't leaking, and you just want to make sure you're not leaking here. And then you want to make sure your caps, whether you're using a weather cap or a rubber cap, make sure your caps are on and they're sealed well. And we'll go over that. Now this is, let's say we're working on number 3 here, and it's going to be a few minutes before we can get it. You just take this, put that in there, and now you don't worry about debris falling inside there. That's what this is for. It's kind of neat, you know, kind of neat. Just sits right in there, and you just pop it on. That way you don't worry about knocking anything in there. But that's what it is. And then this, always leave it attached. You saw how we lowered it down. Went down pretty easy. Now when we put this back, we'll have to clean all this up, get all this excess dope out of here that Marshall over dope this in every, I mean, this is amateurish in my opinion. This is what amateurs do. I wouldn't be surprised if they pipe dope the female threads as well as the male. Otherwise, how do you get that much excess pipe dope oozing out the bottom? I don't know. But when we pull this up, there will be no reliefs in it. We'll pull this up by itself, and it's a lot easier, it's a lot safer. And I don't know what those little rascals weigh, but they're more than 10 pounds a piece. So it's just that much less weight. If you just want to get an idea what they look like on the bottom, there on the inside, you can see where all that pipe dope had built up down inside there. As far as I can tell, none got down inside this seat here. But no matter how you break it down, that's just a heck of a lot of pipe dope. Way more than it needs. So, we're going to work on that. The other one's going to be a repeat of this. So I'm not going to waste your time shooting a video on that. But we'll start up again when we're up there. And then I'll show you how I Teflon tape and pipe dope the reliefs. And then I'll show you how we thread them in so that the next person that has to do this we'll be able to safely do it up on top of the tank and we'll not have to bring it down to the ground like we did. All right, real quick here, just going to show you how we bring them, bring these valve clusters back up. Got a rope. Scott's down on the other end. He's on the other side of the tank. Valve's over here. I'm going to pull and he's going to pull. And that's how we'll get it up. It'll come up really pretty easy here. Let's see what the camera, if I can get the camera to show anything or not. All right, you ready? Pull. That's it. Let go. It's all right. Yeah, so all we did was we wrapped this bath mat around it so it could slide on that. And like I said, we're bringing it up without the relief valves in, save a lot of weight. So we'll get the other one up here, get it staged, and that's going to be it for now. I'm getting ready to get these relief valves all prepped so I can start taking them up. Going to give another quick tutorial on proper thread engagement. I got one video up about that, but I'm going to go over it again. If Marshall Excelsior had followed proper thread engagement, I wouldn't have had to deal with what I had to deal with. So this is 2.5-inch pipe thread. There are 10 full threads from here to here. This is 1.25 inches worth of threads. 2.5-inch diameter pipe thread, when it's fully seated and fully torqued down, should be threaded in around 15/16 to 1 inch deep. Well, the way I do it here, the way I account for it here, is we're going to thread it in until we have 3 full threads showing. So like 1 to the Teflon tape where that is down there, about that much. So this is 2.5-inch pipe thread. That means I use this Teflon tape, 3/4 inch. I like that tape a lot. I put 6 wraps of Teflon tape, and then I use this weld-on pipe sealant, and I put a layer of pipe dope on here. And then when we put it up, and we'll just put 2 of these in a 5-gallon bucket over there, and we'll just lift them up 2 at a time. But I should be able to thread this in by hand all the way down to about here. So I should be able to, you know, get it threaded up in there pretty good by hand. And then finish it off. Then we're going to finish it off with a big impact gun like we took it off with. Like I said, the Marshall literature says these should be tightened. They estimated about 146 foot-pounds of torque. There's no way in hell Marshall torqued these in at the factory at 146 pounds when it takes 2 grown men, a 3-foot pipe wrench, and a 6.5 feet worth of cheater pipe, and it took all that we could do to get, because we pulled 8 of these, 5 of these were ridiculously hard. We couldn't get any of them out with the impact. So this is just proper thread engagement. We don't want to fill this up with too much Teflon tape, and you don't want it filled up with too little. There's a certain amount you ought to be able to thread in by hand. If we thread it all the way down to like this by hand, that means our fittings are too worn out. So that's a quick tutorial on proper thread engagement. So a 2.5 inch is about 15/16 to 1 inch. 3-inch pipe will thread in at least 1 full inch. If you get to where you have to tighten it down to where you've only got a thread and a half or a thread showing, that means you're in too deep and your fittings are probably worn out. So, all right, that's it for now. Okay, on this first valve cluster, I've got all the studs drawn down tight. These are, you can tell by I'm just getting them in hand tight. And so I'm going to run the impact here, and Scott's going to be watching it, and we're going to hammer it down until I've got about 3 full threads showing, and then we'll do all 4 of them like that, and then that'll be it for now. Then I'll work on my second valve cluster. I've got that second one in, just don't have the bolts tight yet, just got these kind of hand tight a little bit. So here we go. Can you see?
Yep.
Good.
Here we got 4.
Okay. So closer to 2.5. 2.5 to 3. That's a little tight, but maybe just a little more. Okay, got all 4 of them in finally. I got about 3 full threads showing. A little tight on one of them, but other than that, we got them in. Yeah. So next time, the next person's got to take these off in 10 years. They're not going to have to take them off the tank like we did. So I'm going to get started on the other valve cluster here. Okay, got a new battery in it now, so it seems to be working better. I'm now done with everything. I've leak tested this 3 times. Like I showed in that one video, I think that last video I put up about changing meters or something, that when I'm checking for leaks on my flanges and stuff, I do it in 3 stages. I do it at low pressure, medium pressure, and then almost a finished pressure. That way, in case I get a leak at a lower pressure, it's easier to pump the tank down or run the compressors, pull it down. So I have the weather caps on, and then here are my weep holes, and these are my deflectors for the weep hole. You take a 1/4 inch Allen wrench, pull that out. So like I said, I got that. I just put like 2 wraps of Teflon tape. You can put a little, or you can put a little pipe dope, or you can put a little blue Loctite. We just want to seal this enough to keep water from migrating down inside there. Otherwise, the rain and stuff and snow will just come right out the bottom here, won't cause an issue. But like I said, it'll give a deflector to shoot it at an angle so they don't impinge on each other. And then last thing are on these covers, because they are subject to UV problems, and you want to make sure they stay tight and they don't get whipped off by the wind. What I do is I use this silicone compound here, which I've shown it in other videos. And so I put a thin layer all the way around here and across this top part of the valve, and then I rub some here on the ring, and that way when you get it down in there, I don't have to worry that in about 3 or 4 or 5 years the sun will break this down and bake this weather cover to where it just, you know, practically melts onto the valve. I won't have to worry about that. And it's it helps it in high winds to not get whipped off. And again, on my leak testing, I just use a mixture of Dawn and water. That's all I use. You can use anything, you know, there's other things that are rated. But soap and water has been a staple in the propane industry for over 100 years as far as a leak detector, so it's a good leak detector. That's why I use it, especially in warm weather. So all I got to do now is take my gaffer tape off because I have no leaks to get rid of it. Otherwise I'm done up here. So I hope this has been informative and helpful for any of you that may have this in your future to come and work on. So hopefully you will not have the same troubles I did, but 16 valves I changed out and only one came out with that 1-inch impact. So not a good ratio. So thank you.